So I'm going to concentrate. So we have new types of society and new models of ownership and governance that are developing, and I think you have the same in some respects. And I'm going to concentrate on two areas where things are changing. One is where we're moving from just being consumer organisations with one constituency of members to multi-constituency, or sometimes called multi-stakeholder. Not a very good word, but so different types of membership. And the other area is where power is distributed in a different way between the elected representatives and the managers. And these developments haven't necessarily come from within the cooperative sector. They've particularly been, I think, happened because the government in legislation in our National Health Service created a new organisation called a Public Benefit Corporation, another legal structure. They're called NHS Foundation Trusts, but for hospitals and health services, they created this new type of organisation, which is like a mutual. It's a form of mutual, where patients and public and workers are members, and it has an elected body, and it has a board of directors. And that's certainly influenced the work I have done. So let me now talk you through it. So if you look at a traditional cooperative, you have the members who elect a small number of people to be the committee or the board, and the board usually appoints an executive or a manager. So in the Rochdale Pioneers, the members elect the committee, and the committee appoints a shopkeeper. And the shopkeeper pretty much gets on with running the shop, and has to come back each week or each month to account to the Democrats, the people who've been elected. And so legal responsibility for the business rests with the board. They're in charge, they're legally in charge, though in practice that it's the manager at the shop who's running the business. And that basic model has stayed in place. So if even for an organisation like the cooperative group, it has members, and they elect people who are on local committees, and they elect people onto a regional board, and from the regional boards you get the main board, who appoint an executive. But it's effectively the same in that the board has the legal control, and these are just intermediate stages because it covers the whole country, because it's so big. But the principle is the same, that there's a small, in the cooperative group's case it was 25 people, and they appoint executives, but the executives are not board members. And that's traditional cooperative approach. And that has worked okay. If it's a small business, the board members don't need to have particular skills. If it's a shop, and actually if it's quite a big business, they might be able to get by if you've got some people with some business experience. But at some point, this model becomes a problem, because if the legal responsibility and the big decisions are made here, but you've started to need very skilled people here, the skills are here, but the legal responsibility for decision making is here. And that had become a problem for the cooperative group before this year. And what happened was that the board made some bad decisions, and so it said, well, we can't have lay people in charge of making these decisions. We need to have people who are highly skilled at running the business. So we need to have, first of all, we need to have the executives on the board. Well, in this country, in the cooperative movement, they think that only elected people can go on the board. But to get the people with the right skills, in my opinion, you should choose them. You should say, these are the qualifications we need. This is the background experience you need. And if you have this experience, please apply for this job. And then you get 10 people and you look at them all and you choose the best person for the job. In my opinion, when you're looking for skills, you appoint them. Because in my opinion, and this is just an opinion, elections, you elect people who are good at representing people. Elections aren't really the way to find the most skillful manager. But that's just my opinion. So once this model started to go wrong, the question is, what do you do next? What do you do about it? Okay, and that's where the cooperative group, that's the problem they've got to. So the first point I mentioned was that we started to have, going back to the different types of members. Do you remember I said that in the cooperative group they only have one constituency? They're just called members. The new approach is to say, well, we want to have employee members and customer members because they've got different interests. They might want to meet differently. You might want to reward them with distributions in a different way. And so what's becoming more common is to have different constituencies, sometimes more than two. So in the health sector, for example, we have a public constituency and an employee constituency, but they can also have a patient constituency and a carer constituency. So if somebody is being cared for by a relative, they could be in the carer's constituency. And you can have as many constituencies as you want. And what you then do, the board, instead of just being made up of representatives of members, the board then has to represent different constituencies. And so people who represent employees will have a different view from people who represent customers. Now, you then start to get a multi-stakeholder board. Now that, in law, is quite difficult because they've got the points of view of different interests. And in law, the people who serve on the board, their legal duty is to do what's best in the interests of the cooperative as a whole. They shouldn't be making a decision on what's best for employees or what's best for customers. So this model, introducing different constituencies, makes the board structure more complicated. And so, again, the governance starts to become more difficult, and in some new mutual organisations, the executive sits on the board as well. Sometimes usually they don't. So what the next kind of development is to say, well, we'll have customer members and employee members, but instead of them electing the board, they can elect a democratic body or a representative body. And that representative body doesn't legally control the organisation anymore, it influences it, but the people who are in control, we need to have a board of directors that needs to include the executives, because the executives have the most knowledge of the business. They're the experts. But we need to have, as well as these experts, we need to have non-executive, people who are independent of the executives, to make sure that they're doing a good job. And these people need to be experienced in running businesses. Because if you just have an elected person who has no business background, they don't have the technical ability to check whether these people are doing a good job. And in reality, that's what the problem was with the cooperative group. These people wanted to, the chief executive wanted to do things. The board didn't have the skills and knowledge to say, no, we shouldn't do that. And they went ahead and did it. They legally made the decision, and it was a bad decision. But actually, it was the executives who were saying, this is what we should do. And that's why the governance model broke down. And so in this model, the elected representatives don't decide what the organisation, they don't decide it's going to take over Britannia Building Society. It's because it's the job of the board of directors. Basically, that's where the skills lie. They take responsibility. Now, you would then say, well, how is this controlled by the members any longer? Isn't this just becoming a company? The answer to that is that the democratic body appoints all of the non-executive directors. It appoints them because of their skills and experience in the way I just described, but it can also remove them. So if the board is doing something, if the board is not performing well, or it's starting to go off in a direction that the elected people don't like, it can threaten to sack them, or it can sack them. And these people appoint and can remove the executives. And so the role of the representative body, or the democratic body, is both to appoint and remove these people, and regularly to meet with the directors to hold them to account. But also, their job is to work with the board of directors to develop the future plans, the strategy. Because if you think about it, the development of the future plans of the organisation it belongs to the members. So the members should play a part in shaping the future services. But they don't have the skills to write the business plan. The skills are here. So they need to work between them to develop the forward plans. And the representative body or the democratic body need to be able to influence those forward plans. Because otherwise, the managers will just do what they want, rather than what the members want.
The question is, when representative body is capable of appointing non-executive directors,
Yes.
Why they cannot appoint the executive?
Okay, the reason for that is because this contains employees, and if they could remove the chief executive, they could remove their boss. So and also, so it puts a break between them and the executive. It also makes the non-executives responsible for making sure that the executives are doing their job properly. And in terms of appointing the non-executive directors, the representative body will need some help. It will need some training, it might need external recruitment consultants to do a proper process. But and once you've gone down this route, and this is the route that we're starting to use in the public sector, as well as having employees here, so you might have, let's say, 10 customers, you might have 5 employees. You might have 1 or 2 people from other agencies if you wanted them to be permanently involved. You might not, but you might, there's the chance in this place to bring in that extra skills and experience. Now that's the model, more or less the model of the public benefit corporation in the NHS. And that's the logic of it. So many cooperatives still operate this way. And big cooperatives in this country. And a number of organisations are moving to this model where it works okay to have a multi-stakeholder board. But it depends on which sector you're in and whether it's regulated. But where you get a very large business like the cooperative, or a business coming out of the public sector, then this model and this model don't really, they're not credible. And so this one is the one that's emerging from in the public sector. This isn't what Cooperative Group are doing, by the way. They're doing something different.
But they haven't announced it yet, no?
They haven't announced it, but it's fairly clear what direction they're going in. And it's a bit of a hybrid, a mixture of different things. I mean, I've published blogs on the Mutuo website about it, but it's a big subject. I mean, we can talk about it if you want to, but perhaps what we should do is finish these slides first. So this is just a slide to show you the organisation you're going to see tomorrow, Rochdale Borough White Housing. So they have tenant members, so it's tenants and the family of the people in their household, and they have employee members, and they each elect, the tenants elect 15 tenants, the employees elect 8 employees. These are what are called tenant management organisations, so on housing estates, they have 3 of those, so they appoint, so that's effectively 3 more tenants. The local council, who used to own all the houses before this organisation, they have 4 representatives, and that's because the council still provides local government services. And they can have external stakeholders, but they haven't got any others. And they appoint 6 non-executive directors, and the non-executives appoint 2 executive directors.
They're asking about, in terms of legal control, when we said before, this board was elected from the members, so they have the legal responsibility of the own decisions, right? But they're asking is when board members are appointed by representative people, let's say if board makes some bad decision, but still board will be responsible for their own decision. So they're wondering when board is not elected, when they're only appointed, they feel, are they willing to be responsible for any legal responsibility? Or?
Well, it's the law which says who is responsible. And the law says that the board of directors carry legal responsibility. And one of the problems with this model is that the law says that a group of people are responsible who don't necessarily have the skills and experience. Cooperative people wouldn't like this. They would say, these people aren't elected. But for a large, complex business, the most important thing for the business to survive is that the people have the right skills and competence. And what's happened at the cooperative group shows that if you don't get that right, then the business suffers, and the business, very bad damage was done to the business because they didn't have the right skills. And for me, electing people from the membership will not produce the right skills. If you want to run a complicated business, you have to find the people with the skills and give them the legal responsibility, but you don't give them complete control. You say your job is to run the business, but we will tell you what the business is. We have to approve the forward plans. Well, if I just do the last few slides. So, why is this new approach happening? Well, first of all, as I say, in my view, democratic elections can't be relied to produce people with the right business skills. And members don't necessarily have the right business skills for a very big business. In the traditional cooperative model, this is addressed by giving executive power to appointed individuals who have those skills. But that starts to become a problem for a very big business. And I think the multi-stakeholder board doesn't really work. It becomes there are too many factions, too many interests. And also, that approach isn't consistent with modern attitudes to corporate governance, which require individuals in control to have the right skills and experience. If we look at the private sector, we might not like the private sector model, but what it's good at doing is getting competent, qualified people into the posts. It has to be said that general corporate governance doesn't really respect open democracy in business. That's the private sector always regards that as a very strange idea. But from the cooperative sector, we regard that as normal. And the success of cooperatives in this country and around the world suggests that the private sector don't like it because they just want to have all the business themselves. But also they're suspicious of the conflict of interest, that if you've got representatives, particularly in a multi-stakeholder board, they're going to represent employees or customers, and they won't look at the bigger picture for the organisation as a whole. And so there is a big cultural problem for cooperatives in moving to a new model of governance, because their history, their democratic history, makes it very hard for them to accept modern ideas of corporate governance. And so the new mutual approach, which I've just shown you, doesn't come from the traditional cooperative world, it's coming from public sector reform. So if we now look at public sector, healthcare, social care, childcare, all the areas where lots of services are needed, which traditionally the state has provided. There are two reasons why a cooperative or mutual model is an attractive way to deliver services. The first is that it's important to engage with employees and with service users, with patients, so that they have a voice. Historically, we treat, in this country, they just have to get whatever they're offered. It's very top-down. It's controlled from London, and if it's good, that's fine, but if it's not, too bad. And services need to have a mechanism for people to engage and be part of it. And the second reason is that the way that services are delivered needs to change so that customers, patients and employees are involved in the process of designing and delivering services, so that it's not like going to the shop. It's much more interactive. And so to take the example of health, so that instead of waiting till you're sick and going to the hospital, you actually take care of your own health so that you don't ever go to hospital. And so we refer to this broadly as co-production, and it's the same in the housing organisation. They want the tenants to work alongside the employees to help to maintain the properties and to deliver the services in an improving way. And this is really important because the old top-down way of delivering services economically is doomed, because people just want more and more and more and more, because they say, well, it's public services, we don't have to pay. And they need to take ownership of the problem and the limits of the resources. We all need to change our attitudes, our mindset, because actually the only resources are those resources we're all paying with our taxes. So unless we have a collective responsibility for our health, our well-being, our old people's well-being, unless we stop being these selfish consumers and become more aware citizens, then the problem will get worse. And the last point is to make sure that those who are in charge of delivering services are directly accountable to the people who are accessing. And this is just to show, so the people who are in charge of delivery of services, the executives, they are appointed and they're constantly being reviewed by the non-executives. And if they're doing a good job, then they can be congratulated and encouraged. If they're not doing such a good job, they need to be corrected or improved. And if they're really bad, they have to go. They have to be replaced. And that is, if you like, the part of the process of accountability. And the same is happening here. The elected representatives appoint the non-executive directors, and if they're doing their job well of reviewing the executives, then they will get good feedback and they will be reappointed. But if not, they will be replaced. And it's the same here with the members and their elected representatives. And all these are constantly iterative, we say. It's an ongoing thing all the time. But in this way, ultimately, people, citizens in the community, there is some accountability through this chain to make sure that these people are doing a good job for these people who are paying taxes. So I think these are the principles that, and the first one is competence, having the right skills. Is essential. Now, some people still think that you can elect, well, okay, that's what the cooperative group, they're going to elect their new executive directors, but there's only one person on the ballot paper. So it's not an open election, it's not a contested election. So to me, it's not an election. Why don't you just choose them and appoint them? So competence, having the right person, so that you're less likely to make mistakes, is the first principle. But the second principle is that democratically elected representatives must play a part in shaping future services and appointing those who hold power and holding to account. And that individuals need to have an appropriate voice through the ownership and governance structure. and that putting in place the organisation doesn't itself solve the problem. Structures are helpful, but they don't solve the problem. Ultimately, there needs to be an operational culture of mutuality and co-production and values and principles, because unless there is the culture that makes the organisation live out those principles, then the structure is meaningless.